The bleeding tree. There's something unnatural about silence on a moonless night. It isn't the absence of sound that disturbs you. It's the way the quiet seems to hum, as though the darkness itself is alive, vibrating just beyond the range of your hearing. That was the kind of night it was when I first encountered the bleeding tree. I was driving home from the hospital where a double shift had left me half-dazed, too tired to think, but too alert to slip into that comfortable autopilot. The road stretched out in a ribbon of shadows, the only light my car's dim headlights. It was a path I knew well, yet tonight, it felt different. Halfway through the drive, my GPS flickered. I glanced at the screen, frowning as it recalculated without prompt. The new route was unfamiliar, a jagged line through back roads I'd never taken. I slowed the car, torn between ignoring it or trusting that it might shave off some time from my journey. Curiosity won. The new path veered sharply off the main road and into a dense stretch of forest. My tires crunched gravel, the sound oddly deafening in the stillness. Trees loomed on either side of the narrow road, their branches arching overhead in a tangled canopy that blocked out even the faintest hint of stars. I told myself I'd made a mistake, that I should turn back. But the GPS kept urging me forward, its mechanical voice calm, almost insistent. Continue straight for 2 miles. 2 miles turned into eternity. The trees seemed to close in, and my headlights barely penetrated the darkness. I gripped the wheel tighter, my unease growing with every passing second. Then, out of nowhere, the road widened into a clearing. I stopped the car and stared. In the center of the clearing stood a tree unlike any I'd ever seen. It was massive, its trunk gnarled and twisted like a thing in pain. The bark was dark, almost black, with faint red veins running through it, pulsing softly as though alive. The branches reached upward in a grotesque sprawl, clawing at the sky. And standing next to it was a man. At first I thought he might be lost, like me. But as I stepped out of the car, I realized there was something off about him. His clothes hung on his wiry frame like a shroud, and his face was gaunt, his hollow eyes catching the faint glimmer of my headlights. "Evening," I said, though my voice trembled. He didn't respond, just tilted his head slightly, as if studying me. Then, without a word, he pointed to the tree. It was a simple gesture, yet it sent a jolt of dread through me. What's this place?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The tree weeps," he rasped, his voice as dry and brittle as dead leaves. "For those who cut it." I took a step back, my heart thudding in my chest. "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer. Instead, he shuffled toward the tree, leaning heavily on a gnarled cane. At its base lay an old, rusted axe, the blade dulled with age, but still formidable. "See for yourself," he said, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I should have left then. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in the car and drive away, but something held me there. It wasn't just curiosity. It was the way the tree seemed to call to me, a pull I couldn't explain. The man stepped back, gesturing to the axe. "Cut it. Only then will you understand." I don't know what possessed me to pick up the axe. Perhaps it was exhaustion, clouding my judgment. Or perhaps it was the tree itself, radiating an unspoken demand. Either way, I found myself gripping the handle, the metal cold and unyielding against my palm. The man watched silently as I approached the tree. Its surface seemed to thrum under the faint light of my phone's flashlight, the red veins pulsing faster as I drew closer. I hesitated, the weight of the axe growing heavier with each step. "Why are you making me do this?" I asked, though I wasn't sure who I was speaking to, the man or the tree. Neither answered. With a deep breath, I raised the axe and swung it into the trunk. The sound wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the sharp crack of wood splitting, but something wet, something visceral. A deep, guttural moan erupted from the tree, resonating through the clearing and into my bones. Then came the blood. Thick and dark, It oozed from the wound in slow, deliberate rivulets, pooling at the base of the trunk. The air filled with the metallic tang of iron so strong I could taste it. I staggered back, dropping the axe. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The blood didn't stop. It flowed steadily, soaking into the ground, and with it came whispers, low, guttural murmurs that seemed to rise from the earth itself. "What the hell is this?" I shouted, turning to the man. But he was gone. The clearing was empty, save for me and the tree. My flashlight flickered, its beam dimming as though the darkness itself was swallowing the light. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They weren't words, not exactly, but they carried a weight that pressed against my skull. Images flashed in my mind, faces twisted in agony, hands clawing at the air, mouths open in silent screams. I stumbled toward my car, my only thought to get away from this cursed place. But the ground seemed to shift beneath me, the once solid earth turning soft and grasping at my shoes. I fell to my knees, my hands sinking into the blood-soaked soil. The tree groaned again, a sound so mournful it brought tears to my eyes. "You shouldn't have cut it." The voice was everywhere and nowhere, reverberating through the clearing. I looked up, my vision swimming, and saw the tree's branches moving, not swaying in the wind, but writhing, twisting like living things. The whispers became screams, and the blood began to rise. It defied gravity, climbing up the tree in jagged streams, forming shapes in the air. Faces, eyes. I scrambled to my feet, slipping in the muck, and ran. My car was only a few yards away, but it felt like miles. The air thickened, weighing down my limbs, and the screams followed me, echoing in my ears. When I finally reached the car, I didn't look back, but as I slammed the door and started the engine, I caught a glimpse of the tree in my rearview mirror. The blood had stopped flowing, and the clearing was silent once more. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me, that the tree's whispers had burrowed into my mind. And then I saw it. A handprint smeared in blood on the inside of my windshield. The drive home felt like an eternity. The road seemed endless, an ink-black void that swallowed the world beyond my headlights. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, the smear of blood on the windshield glaring at me under the dim interior light. No matter how many times I blinked, it remained, fresh, wet, and unyielding. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. Maybe I was overtired, hallucinating after my long shift. Maybe the blood from the tree had transferred somehow, and my mind was exaggerating the details. But deep down, I knew the truth. Whatever I had disturbed in that clearing, it had followed me. The whispering began again. It started as faint murmurs, like voices just out of reach. I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the old man's gaunt face peering back at me, but the back seat was empty. My pulse quickened as the whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices blending into a cacophony of pain and rage. "The blood is yours now." I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt in the middle of the deserted road. My chest heaved as I gripped the steering wheel, the voices fading into silence as suddenly as they'd begun. I sat there, my breath fogging the windshield, and stared into the darkness ahead. A creeping sense of dread filled me as I realized the truth. I couldn't go home. I couldn't bring this thing, whatever it was, into my house. Turning the car around felt impossible. I couldn't face that tree again. So, I drove. Aimlessly, endlessly, until the first hints of dawn bled into the horizon. The faint light did little to ease my terror. If anything, it only made the events of the night feel more real. Eventually, exhaustion forced me to pull over at a roadside motel. The clerk barely glanced at me as I handed over cash for a room, too drained to notice the bloodstains on my clothes or the haunted look in my eyes. Once inside, I locked the door and shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. The room was suffocatingly small, the air stale and heavy, but it felt safer than the car. I collapsed onto the bed, my body trembling with the aftershocks of adrenaline, and tried to convince myself that I could sleep. but sleep didn't come. Hours passed, though time felt meaningless. My phone had died somewhere along the way, and I didn't dare plug it in. Something about being connected to the outside world felt dangerous, as if that simple act would make me vulnerable to whatever force had latched onto me. The whispers returned as night fell. This time, they weren't distant or muffled. They were in the room with me. I shot upright, my eyes darting around the small space. Shadows danced across the walls, their movements erratic and unnatural. The air grew cold, and the scent of iron filled my nostrils. Then I saw it. The blood. It seeped from the cracks in the walls, thick and glistening, pooling on the floor in slow, deliberate waves. My breath hitched as the pool began to ripple, the surface breaking as shapes formed, hands clawing their way toward me. I stumbled back, pressing myself against the headboard. "What do you want from me?" I screamed, my voice breaking. The shadows coalesced, forming a figure at the foot of the bed. It was tall, impossibly thin, its face featureless except for two hollow eyes that burned with crimson light. "The blood is yours now," it said, its voice a chorus of 1,000 anguished whispers. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I didn't mean to. You took the axe. You made the cut." The figure reached out, its elongated fingers curling toward me. The blood on the floor surged forward, splashing against my feet, and the whispers became screams. I bolted for the door, shoving the chair aside with trembling hands. The lock stuck, the knob cold and unyielding under my grip. Behind me, the figure loomed closer, its presence suffocating. With a desperate scream, I threw my weight against the door. It burst open and I stumbled into the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickering ominously. But the whispers followed. I drove until the gas tank hit empty, the highway stretching endlessly before me. The shadowy figure haunted the edges of my vision, a phantom that refused to be left behind. Even the sunlight felt wrong now, dim, pallid, as though the world itself had been tainted by the tree's curse. I had to go back. The realization hit me like a blow to the chest. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to stop. The blood wasn't just on my windshield or my clothes. It was in me. I could feel it, coursing through my veins, heavy and suffocating. The tree had claimed me, and there was only one way to end it. It was dusk by the time I returned to the clearing. The road felt longer this time, the trees closing in like watchful sentinels. My hands shook as I parked the car, the engine sputtering into silence. The clearing was as I had left it, though the tree seemed larger, its branches twisted into unnatural angles. The axe still lay at its base, the blade gleaming as though freshly sharpened. As I stepped into the clearing, the air grew heavier, pressing against my chest like a physical weight. The whispers began again, louder now, a relentless tide that drowned out my thoughts. "You returned." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. The tree groaned, its branches swaying despite the still air. The blood began to seep from its trunk, the thick crimson liquid pooling at my feet. "You cut me," it said, the words vibrating through the ground. "Now you must feed me." "What does that mean?" I screamed. Images flooded my mind, visions of people standing where I now stood, their faces pale with terror. One by one, they swung the axe, cutting into the tree's flesh, and one by one, they fell to their knees as the blood consumed them. The tree demanded a sacrifice. "No," I whispered, backing away. "I won't." Before I could finish, the ground beneath me shifted. Roots burst from the soil, curling around my legs and dragging me to the earth. The blood surged forward, climbing up my body like living tendrils. The whispers became screams as the tree's branches reached for me, their twisted ends sharp as knives. Desperation clawed at my throat. I grabbed the axe, its handle slick with blood, and swung it wildly. The blade connected with one of the roots, and the tree howled, a sound so inhuman it made my ears ring. I kept swinging, the blood spraying in thick arcs. The roots recoiled, their grip loosening, and I scrambled to my feet. The tree shuddered, its branches thrashing wildly. For a moment I thought I had won. Then I saw the faces in the blood. They rose from the pool, their features twisted in agony. Eyes stared at me, mouths opening and closing as though gasping for air. "You cannot escape!" the tree roared, its voice splitting the air. "You are mine!" I screamed as the faces surged toward me, their hands clawing at my skin. And then everything went black. When I woke, the clearing was silent. The blood was gone, the whispers had ceased, and the sky above was an ashen gray, the air unnaturally still. My body felt heavy, as though weighed down by something unseen, and my hands were slick with dried crimson. I tried to stand, but the ground beneath me seemed alive, pulsating faintly as if mocking my efforts. Around me, the tree loomed larger than before, its branches tangled into grotesque, almost humanoid shapes. The axe lay beside me, its blade clean despite the carnage I remembered. Then came the voice louder than ever, vibrating through my skull. "Choose." The single word echoed in the clearing, each syllable a command that sank deep into my bones. I clutched my head, my vision swimming as images flashed before me again. The faces of those who came before, their lives stolen by the tree. They weren't victims. They were sacrifices. "What do you want?" I rasped, my throat dry and raw. The tree groaned, its branches twisting toward me. The blood must be fed. The cut must be repaid. I staggered back, the words hitting me like a physical blow. It was clear now. The tree wasn't alive in any natural sense. It was a vessel, a conduit for something ancient, something that demanded suffering as its price. "Why me?" I shouted, desperation rising in my voice. The branches creaked, and the red veins in the bark pulsed brighter. "Because you came. You made the choice to cut." The blood began to seep again, slow and deliberate, pooling at my feet. I could feel its warmth soaking through my shoes, its iron scent thick in the air. "The axe," the voice whispered, softer now, almost coaxing. "One life to save another." I looked down at the axe, my hands trembling as I reached for it. It felt impossibly heavy, as though it carried the weight of every soul that had wielded it before me. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but deep down I knew there wasn't one. The blood was in me now. I could feel it, a slow poison coursing through my veins, tying me to the tree. "Who?" I asked, my voice breaking. The tree groaned again, the sound reverberating through the clearing. "You know?" And I did. The face of the old man flashed in my mind, his hollow eyes watching me as I made that first cut. He had escaped this fate once, passing the burden on to me. That's why he had vanished. That's why the tree had chosen me. But now, I had a choice. I stumbled to my feet, the axe dragging behind me as I moved toward the tree. The blood surged forward, as though anticipating my decision, and the whispers returned, pleading, screaming, urging me on. The old man's face flickered again in my mind, but this time, it wasn't a memory. It was a vision. He was out there somewhere, living free while I stood here, trapped in the tree's grasp. "Find him," the tree demanded. "Bring him back, or take his place." I hesitated, the axe trembling in my grip. Could I really condemn someone else to this fate? Could I track him down and force him to return, knowing what awaited him here? The tree groaned, the sound vibrating through the clearing with such force that the ground beneath me quaked. "Choose!" My thoughts spiraled, the weight of the decision crushing me. If I refused, the tree would take me, consume me as it had the others. My face would join the blood, my screams the whispers that haunted the next unfortunate soul. But if I chose him... I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stand straighter. The axe felt lighter now, its purpose clear. The whispers grew louder as I stepped back, the tree's blood surging like a tide. My heart pounded as I raised the axe, its blade gleaming in the dull light. "I'll find him," I whispered, my voice shaking. "But this ends with him. No one else." The tree's branches swayed, and for a moment the clearing fell silent. Then a low, guttural laugh echoed around me, a sound that chilled me to my core. "The blood is patient," it said. "It will wait." As I stumbled back to the car, the clearing began to blur, the tree fading into the shadows of the forest. The whispers had stopped, but their weight lingered, a presence I couldn't shake. I drove aimlessly, my mind heavy with the bargain I had struck. The old man was out there somewhere, and I would find him, not for the tree, but for myself. But as the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, a terrible thought crept into my mind. What if he wasn't the first? What if he wasn't the last? And what if the tree's hunger would never truly end? The whispers returned, faint but persistent, as the blood pulsed in my veins. "The blood is yours now,"